They brought the human into the great alien hall, where the queen sat high on her glowing throne. Hundreds of alien eyes followed him, whispering in a language he could not understand. An alien girl stepped forward, tall, graceful, with silver skin that shimmered under the light. She looked right at him and said, "Prove your loyalty to our queen." The hall went silent. He opened his mouth to ask how, but she spoke first. Her voice was calm, almost soft. Only mating can do that. Ryan froze. Was this a joke? The queen leaned forward, watching him like a hunter waiting for its prey. The girl's eyes told him she was serious, deadly serious, and somewhere deep in his chest, Ryan knew saying no might be the most dangerous choice of his life. The grand alien hall was vast and filled with a strange, glowing light. The walls seemed alive, shifting with colors like the surface of water. Ryan stood there, feeling small, as rows of alien faces stared down at him from high seats. Their eyes glimmered in the dim light, some curious, some cold. At the far end, on a raised platform of crystal, sat the queen. She was tall and elegant, with a crown made of silver branches that shimmered when she moved. Her gown looked like it was made from flowing starlight, and her gaze was sharp enough to pierce through him. She said nothing at first, just studied him as if trying to read his soul. A soft sound of footsteps drew Ryan's attention. An alien girl stepped forward from the queen's side. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin had a gentle, silver glow, and her long hair moved like silk in a breeze he couldn't feel. Her eyes held a strange mix of warmth and warning. She stopped in front of him. "Prove your loyalty to our queen," she said, her voice calm but firm. Ryan blinked, unsure he had heard her right. "Loyalty?" he asked carefully. "How I am? I suppose to prove that." The girl's expression didn't change. She spoke slowly, almost as if the words carried weight she didn't want to drop too quickly. "Only mating can do that." The entire hall seemed to grow quieter, as if even the walls were listening. Ryan stared at her, certain this had to be some kind of mistake. But the queen was leaning forward now, her silver crown catching the light. Her eyes locked on him like she was waiting for his next move. Ryan's voice caught in his throat. "I don't understand," he said softly. The alien girl stepped a little closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "In our world, this is the deepest promise you can make. It is how we show trust that cannot be broken." Ryan's mind raced. He had come here to talk about peace, not this. He glanced around, seeing dozens of aliens watching him with unblinking eyes. Some looked curious. Others looked like they were already judging him. "If I say no?" he asked. The girl's lips pressed together for a moment, and she shook her head just slightly. "It will not end well," she whispered. The queen finally spoke, her voice clear and commanding. "Human, you stand before me in my court. Words are wind. I require proof. Will you accept our way, or not?" Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct told him this was dangerous. But something about the way the girl looked at him made him hesitate. There was a message in her eyes, something she wasn't saying out loud. The hall remained silent. Even the shifting walls seemed to pause. He thought about the long journey that had brought him here, the trust his people had placed in him, and the mission he had been given. This was not part of the plan, yet walking away might mean losing everything. The alien girl's voice came again, softer this time. "Trust me," she said. Ryan took a slow breath, trying to read her face. She looked serious, but there was also a flicker of fear there, not for herself, but maybe for him. He glanced up at the queen. Her gaze did not waver. The weight of her presence pressed down on him, making it hard to think clearly. Finally, he spoke. "I need to understand more before I decide." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded once. "Then you shall have one night," she said. "By the next moonrise, you will give me your answer." The guards stepped forward, their tall forms casting long shadows across the glowing floor. Ryan wasn't sure if they were there to guide him or make sure he didn't try to leave. The alien girl turned and began walking toward a set of tall doors at the side of the hall. She glanced back once, her eyes meeting his. Without a word, she tilted her head, signaling him to follow. He walked after her. the sound of his footsteps echoing in the vast hall. The doors closed behind them with a soft, final sound. The corridor beyond was quiet and dim, lit only by soft strips of light along the walls. The air was warmer here, carrying a faint scent like blooming flowers mixed with something unfamiliar. After a few moments, Ryan finally asked, "Why me? Why would your queen demand this from a stranger?" The girl kept walking, her steps graceful and measured. "Because," she said after a pause, "you are not just any stranger. You were chosen." Ryan frowned. "Chosen for what?" She stopped, turning to face him. The shadows in the corridor made her silver eyes shine faintly. "There are things I cannot say here," she murmured. "Walls have ears, but you need to understand this. Your choice tomorrow will change everything, not just for you, but for me as well." Ryan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air around them. Before he could ask more, a soft sound came from somewhere up ahead, like the echo of a distant chime. The girl's eyes darted toward the noise, and she lowered her voice even further. "We must talk in private. There are truths the queen would not want you to know, yet." Her words hung in the air, carrying a weight Ryan couldn't ignore. He had come here expecting diplomacy. Instead, he had stepped into something far deeper and far more dangerous than he could have imagined. And now, the clock was ticking. Ryan followed her through the dim corridor, the soft hum of the glowing walls surrounding them. The place felt alive, as if it was listening. Every so often, he caught the girl glancing over her shoulder, checking if they were alone. Her steps were quiet, almost floating, but there was a sharpness in her movements, like she was in a hurry without wanting to show it. They entered a smaller chamber with curved walls and a single round window that looked out onto the alien city. Strange towers of crystal rose into the night sky, their surfaces shimmering like water under moonlight. Distant lights moved between them, and Ryan wondered if they were ships or creatures. The girl closed the door behind them and pressed her hand against the smooth panel. A soft ripple of light ran through the wall, and the faint hum faded. "No one can hear us now," she said quietly. Ryan stepped closer, still trying to understand. "You said my choice will change everything. Why? What's really going on?" For a moment, she hesitated, her silver eyes searching his face. Then she walked to the window and looked out. "Our queen, she is not what she seems to most. She rules with calmness, but she is surrounded by those who wait for her to fall. The court is full of watchers and whisperers. Every move she makes is judged." Ryan crossed his arms, thinking, "And me, I'm just a visitor. Why pull me into this?" She turned back to him, the starlight from the window brushing against her hair. "Because you're not part of our world. You don't carry their politics, their grudges, or their fears. That makes you dangerous to them and valuable to her." Ryan frowned. "And the whole only mating can prove loyalty thing, that's just tradition." Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Tradition, and something more. The bond is not only physical, it is mental, emotional. Once made, it is impossible to hide truth from one another. If you agreed, the queen would know everything in your heart, and you would know hers." The thought made Ryan uneasy. "So, it's not really about romance. It never was," she said softly. "It is about trust no one can fake. In our history, the bond has been used to find allies and to find enemies." He let out a slow breath, his mind working through what she was saying. "So if I say yes, the queen will see if I'm truly loyal. But if I'm not, she will know instantly," the girl finished, "and the bond will break you." Her words sent a shiver through him, not because of any threat in her voice, but because of how certain she sounded. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered against the dark sky. Then Ryan asked the question that had been sitting in the back of his mind. "And you? What happens to you if I refuse?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. "If you refuse, they will say I failed my duty. And in the court, failure is something that never fades." He realized then that she wasn't only speaking for the queen's sake. She was speaking for her own survival. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, pulling her attention toward the door. She pressed her hand to the panel again, and the faint hum returned. "We must go. Too many eyes are watching already." Ryan followed her back into the corridor, but now he noticed more details, small, glowing marks on the walls, the way shadows moved in corners even when no one was there. The air felt heavier, as if the palace itself knew he carried an unanswered question. They passed to tall figures in pale robes. Their faces were hidden, but Ryan could feel their eyes following him. Salira. He had learned her name when they walked here, kept her gaze forward, her posture calm. But he caught the small way her hand brushed the fabric at her side, like someone checking if something hidden was still there. As they neared another set of doors, she spoke without looking at him. Tomorrow, when the queen asks, you cannot hesitate. She will read more from your pause than from your words. Ryan almost asked what she wanted him to say, but then the doors ahead opened, spilling warm light into the corridor. The sound of quiet voices drifted out, court members, talking in a language he still couldn't follow. Salira's eyes met his once more. "Remember what I told you," she said. Then her expression changed, softening in a way that almost didn't match her careful tone. "And remember, I asked you to trust me first." The two of them stepped into the light, and the conversation in the room stopped. Dozens of alien eyes turned toward them again, and Ryan felt that same strange pressure he'd felt in the hall earlier, as if the whole palace was holding its breath. He still didn't know what he would decide tomorrow, but one thing was certain: whatever choice he made, there would be no turning back. The next morning began with a soft, echoing tone that filled Ryan's room. The sound was not harsh, but it carried a strange weight, like a reminder of something that could not be avoided. He opened his eyes to see a pale golden light streaming through a tall, curved window. Beyond it, the alien city stretched toward the horizon, wrapped in a mist that glowed faintly under the sun. When the door slid open, Salira stepped inside. She wore a flowing robe of deep blue, its edges embroidered with silver patterns that looked almost like constellations. "It is the day of the test," she said simply. Ryan sat up slowly. "So it's really happening." She gave a small nod. "The queen has prepared the chamber of oaths. Once the sun touches the horizon, the bonding will begin." Ryan stood, walking toward the window. "And until then, you must prepare," she said, her tone calm but not without a hint of caution. "This is not just a ceremony. Every step, every look, every thought you have today will be noticed. The queen watches even when you think she is not." Two attendants entered the room carrying a folded set of garments. They were made of a soft, shimmering fabric that shifted colors in the light, sometimes silver, sometimes pale gold. The robe was long and slightly heavy, but smooth to the touch. Ryan ran his fingers over it, feeling faint patterns woven into the cloth. Salira explained, "These are worn only by those who stand in the chamber. They will mark you as a participant in the test. You may not speak to anyone outside the court until the ceremony begins." As he dressed, Ryan noticed the way the fabric seemed to hum faintly against his skin. It wasn't loud, more like the feeling of standing near a gentle current of electricity. When he looked in the mirror-like surface of the wall, he almost didn't recognize himself. The attendants left quietly, and Salira gestured for him to follow. They walked through long corridors, some lined with tall windows showing the open sky, others enclosed by walls that shifted with a slow, dreamlike movement. Now and then, Ryan caught sight of courtiers watching them from balconies above, their expressions unreadable. They stopped before a pair of tall doors made from crystal, so clear it looked like frozen water. Salira placed her hand on the surface, and the doors opened with a faint ripple. Inside, the Chamber of Oaths was unlike anything Ryan had seen. The floor was a perfect circle, made of a smooth, white stone that glowed from within. Around the edges, tall pillars rose up to meet a domed ceiling painted with shifting stars. In the center was a small platform just large enough for the people to stand together. Salira stepped forward, her voice lowering. "Here is where the bond is formed. Once you stand there with me, you cannot step away until the queen speaks the final word." Ryan walked around the edge of the room, his footsteps echoing softly. He noticed thin lines carved into the floor, forming intricate patterns that led toward the central platform. They reminded him of a map, though he couldn't tell what it was supposed to represent. Salira watched him carefully. "When the moment comes, you will take my hand. You must not break the connection. no matter what you see or feel. The bond will draw out memories, yours and mine, and the Queen will see them. She will know the truth of who you are." Ryan hesitated. "And if she sees something she doesn't like?" Salira's gaze shifted toward the ceiling for a brief moment before returning to him. "Then the bond will end before it is complete." That has not happened in many years. She didn't explain what that meant, and Ryan didn't ask. Something in her tone told him the answer wouldn't bring comfort. The sound of a soft chime filled the chamber, and Salira's expression tightened. "We have only a short time left. There is something I must give you." She reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small, round stone that glowed faintly from within. "Keep this with you. It will not interfere with the ceremony, but it will help you remember who you are." Ryan took the stone, feeling a gentle warmth in his palm. "Why would I forget?" She didn't answer directly. The bond can be overwhelming. Some lose themselves in the other's thoughts. This will guide you back. Before he could ask more, the doors opened again, and two robed figures entered. They bowed slightly to Salira, then gestured for both of them to follow. As they walked back into the corridors, Ryan felt a new kind of tension in the air. Servants and courtiers stopped to watch them pass. Whispered voices echoed against the walls, though he couldn't understand the words. Finally, they reached a balcony that overlooked the entire city. The sun was beginning to sink, casting long beams of gold across the rooftops. Salira stood beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Once the sun is gone, there will be no turning back." Ryan closed his fingers around the warm stone in his hand, trying to steady his thoughts. Far below, the city lights began to awaken, one by one. Somewhere in the distance, a deep, slow drumbeat began to sound, marking the approach of night. Salira's eyes met his. "It is time to decide, Ryan." The drumbeat grew louder, and the shadows of the towers stretched toward them like reaching hands. The chamber was lit only by the pale glow from the floor and the slow swirl of stars painted across the ceiling. The sound of the drumbeats had faded into a low hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Ryan stood at the edge of the central platform, his pulse steady, but his thoughts caught between curiosity and uncertainty. Salira stepped beside him, her silver robe brushing lightly against his own. She extended her hand without a word, her expression calm, but her eyes holding something unspoken, a weight he could not name. When Ryan took her hand, the air seemed to change. It was warmer, softer, as if the space around them had folded inward. The carved lines on the floor began to glow faintly, their light traveling toward the platform in slow, pulsing waves. A quiet voice, not the Queen's, echoed through the chamber, speaking words Ryan couldn't understand. The sound wasn't frightening, but it felt ancient, like it had been spoken in this place for countless years. Salira's gaze stayed fixed on him. "Whatever comes, do not look away," she said softly. The moment she finished, the light surged up from the floor, wrapping around their joined hands. Ryan felt a gentle pull, not on his body, but somewhere deeper, as if a thread of thought was being drawn outward. Shapes began to form in the air between them, blurred, shifting images that felt both real and dreamlike. He saw flashes of Salira's life, a younger version of her standing under a violet sky, speaking to a group of figures in robes. He saw her walking through a forest of tall crystal towers, touching them as if listening to something only she could hear. The images moved like ripples on water, each one lasting only a moment before melting into the next. Then, without warning, the visions changed. He was no longer seeing her life. He was inside his own memories. The sound of waves crashing, the smell of rain, the soft hum of an old vehicle moving across a quiet road. These moments felt sharper, more vivid than he remembered them. He almost forgot that Salira was still holding his hand, until he noticed her eyes. She was seeing what he saw. The pull between them grew stronger. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was intense, as if the space between their thoughts no longer existed. For a brief moment, Ryan felt as if he could hear her voice without her speaking. "You carry more than you think," the thought seemed to say. He didn't know if it was his imagination or part of the bond. The Queen had not moved from her throne at the far end of the chamber, But Ryan could feel her presence watching through the connection. Not like an intruder, but like someone reading a story they were deeply invested in. The visions began to change again. This time neither his nor Celira's memories, but something else. Scenes of places he had never been. A floating city drifting over an endless sea. A great bridge stretching between two moons. A library so vast it seemed to hold the light of the stars themselves. Ryan's grip on Celira's hand tightened slightly. "What is this?" he asked in a whisper. "Possibilities," she replied. Though her voice seemed far away, the light around them brightened, and the carved lines on the floor shifted, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. Ryan realized they were no longer standing still. The platform beneath them was moving, gliding toward the center of the chamber as if on an invisible track. When it stopped, the hum in the air faded into silence. Celira turned to face the queen. Her expression steady, Ryan followed her gaze. The queen rose from her throne slowly, her robes flowing like liquid silver. She stepped down from the platform where she had been seated, each movement deliberate. She stopped only a short distance away from them, her eyes fixed on their joined hands. "Your thoughts are open," the queen said, her voice carrying through the chamber with ease. "Now, the truth will decide." Ryan didn't know what she meant, but he felt the bond shift again, the pull becoming deeper. It was as though the connection was reaching for something buried far beneath his usual thoughts. Not memories, but intentions, the quiet reasons behind every choice he had made. The sensation was both grounding and strange, like being reminded of something he had always known, but never spoken aloud. Celira's voice came quietly beside him. "Hold on to what matters most." The queen's gaze softened slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. "The bond is not yet complete. The night will decide if you are worthy." The light dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of the floor and the stars above. The silence was deep, but Ryan knew it was not the end. Something else was coming. Celira did not release his hand. The chamber grew quieter than Ryan thought possible. Even the hum in the walls was gone, replaced by a deep stillness that felt almost alive. The glow from the floor faded until only the faint shimmer of starlight above remained. Celira stepped closer to him, her voice barely a whisper. "The night test begins now." Before Ryan could ask what that meant, the floor beneath them rippled. As if made of liquid glass, without a sound, the surface shifted, forming a wide, circular pool that reflected the stars above. The reflection wasn't perfect. The stars in it seemed to move differently, swirling in slow patterns that didn't match the sky. Celira led him toward the center of the pool. Each step felt light, as though the surface was carrying them forward. The air was warmer here, with a faint scent of something like flowers after rain. When they reached the middle, Celira released his hand for the first time since the connection began. "You must stand alone for this part," she said, her eyes calm but watchful. Ryan hesitated. "And what exactly is going to happen?" She tilted her head, considering him. "The queen will see you as you truly are, not just in memory, but in what you may yet become." Before he could respond, the water around him began to glow. The light rose slowly, curling like mist until it surrounded him completely. Then, without warning, it folded inward, and the chamber vanished. He was standing on a vast plain beneath a sky of shifting colors. Towers of crystal stretched up from the ground, each one humming faintly. The air was filled with a soft breeze that carried whispers he couldn't quite understand. Ryan looked around, searching for any sign of Celira or the queen, but he was alone. A voice came from behind him, his own voice. "You don't belong here." He turned, and standing there was himself. Not exactly the same, though. This version of him looked older, his eyes sharper, his posture stronger. The other Ryan spoke again. "You've been walking without knowing where the path leads. Now you must choose." Ryan frowned. "Choose what?" The other him gestured toward the distance. To the left, the land stretched into a glowing city built on platforms that floated above the ground. It pulsed with light and movement, a place full of life and connection. To the right, the land rose into a quiet hill crowned with a single tree, its branches reaching toward the shifting sky. It radiated peace, solitude, and something that felt like home. Ryan realized this wasn't a simple choice of places. It was a choice of who he wanted to be. Before he could decide, the ground beneath him shifted again. The vision changed. He now stood in a room filled with long tables covered in strange maps, unfamiliar tools, and books whose pages seemed to rewrite themselves as he looked at them. Figures moved in the shadows, not hostile, but distant, watching him as though waiting for something. In the center of the room, a small object glowed on a pedestal. It was a simple pendant, shaped like a star. The moment Ryan looked at it, he felt warmth in his chest, a quiet certainty that it mattered, though he couldn't explain why. The whispers in the air grew clearer, and he thought he heard Celira's voice among them. What you take from here will shape the bond. He reached for the pendant. The moment his fingers touched it, the vision dissolved, and he was back in the pool chamber. The water still glowing faintly at his feet. Celira stood before him, her gaze fixed on his hand. The queen was now closer than before, her expression unreadable but intent. Ryan looked down. The pendant was still there, warm against his palm. The queen's voice filled the chamber. A choice has been made. The night has not ended, but the path is now set. The glow from the pool began to fade, and Ryan realized the test was far from over. Something in the queen's tone told him that the hardest part was yet to come. Celira stepped beside him again, her hand brushing lightly against his. "Hold steady," she whispered. "The dawn will decide everything." The chamber felt different when the last of the pool's glow faded. A faint light seeped from the high ceiling, soft and golden, like the very first moments of sunrise. Ryan could hear the quiet hum of the walls again, but now it sounded slower, almost like a calm heartbeat. Celira stood at his side, her posture straight yet gentle. "The final moment is here," she said softly. "Once the dawn completes, your bond will either be sealed or fade forever." Ryan's fingers tightened slightly around the pendant in his palm. Its warmth had not faded, and each time he glanced at it, he felt the memory of that strange plane and the choice he had made there. The queen was watching him closely, her silver eyes steady and unreadable. Without speaking, she extended her hand toward him. Ryan hesitated, unsure if she meant for him to give her the pendant or to take her hand. Celira leaned in just enough for him to hear her whisper, "She is not asking for the object. She is asking for you to decide what it means." The queen's gaze never left his face. Around them, the air shimmered as if the walls themselves were listening. Ryan realized that everyone present, whether they spoke or not, was waiting for the meaning of his choice to reveal itself. He looked at the pendant again. In his mind, he heard faint echoes of the visions, the city, the tree, the maps, the whispers. He thought about what each meant, and more importantly, what it said about who he was. Slowly, he stepped forward. The queen did not move. When he was close enough to feel the faint, cool breeze that seemed to surround her, he opened his palm and held out the pendant, but instead of placing it in her hand, he closed his fist over it again. "I keep this," he said quietly, "because loyalty is not something I give away. It's something I live by, and if I live it, you'll see it every day." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger. There was a small shift in her expression, almost curiosity, almost respect. Celira's lips curved just slightly, a gesture so subtle Ryan wasn't sure if it was real or imagined. For several long moments, no one spoke. The hum in the walls grew softer until it was almost gone. Then the queen lowered her hand and stepped back. A single beam of golden light spilled from above, falling directly on Ryan. The warmth of it spread through him like sunlight after a long winter. The pendant in his hand glowed brighter for a heartbeat, then settled into a calm, steady shine. Celira touched his shoulder lightly. "It is done," she said. "The queen has accepted your path." Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized. He was holding. The weight in the air seemed to lift, and the hall slowly came back to life, with quiet movement. As they turned to leave, the queen's voice followed him, soft, yet carrying easily through the chamber. "What you have chosen today will guide more than your own steps. See that you honor it." Ryan didn't answer aloud, but he closed his hand over the pendant once more. It was warm, not just from the light, but from something deeper, something that felt alive. He had the sense that his time here was not ending, but only just beginning. Celira walked beside him, glancing at him from time to time. There was no need for words now. Whatever this connection was, it had passed its first test. But Ryan knew there would be more ahead, challenges that might make this moment feel small in comparison. Still, as they left the chamber and the light of the Queen's Hall faded behind them, he felt steady. The bond had been set, and whatever came next, he was no longer walking into it alone.